Hello, welcome back. We are in the middle of 2 Samuel chapter 13, and we're in a very difficult passage. Wasn't a lot of fun last week. We had to deal with some rather ugly things, but we're going through it, and we remind ourselves that everything is written is for our example and our instruction, and some things are very uplifting and very encouraging. Some things are dramatic, and they're hard. And so in this part 2 of the message, we're going to look at when the storms continue. We had an analogy last week of derechos and physical storms. David's in the middle, not just David, but his family is in the middle of a big spiritual storm. And there's a lot of different types of ways we could title this, but I put when the storms continue in family drama. Now, before we begin getting back into the passage, we might reflect upon family drama. Families is something that God has created. We have a man, wife, children, of course, siblings, grandparents, cousins, and I think even the most wonderful family at times has a drama. But what we're looking at here is on the far end of the spectrum. And I certainly hope you're not on that end of the spectrum, but we can still identify with it and learn from it. So let's keep that in mind as we dig back into our passage. We take just a minute or two. We're right in the middle of the story, right where we left off. So we talked about different seasons of life. We talked about the sunshine. And we go back a little bit. There were some sunny days for David and the family. Families have sunny seasons. But there's times there can be fighting. There can be storms. Now, in this family of David, there's some names you may not be as familiar with. There are different children, and remember that David's family life was complicated from multiple wives and concubines. But in particular, we have Absalom, and he's going to be very important today. And we have Amnon, also very important. And we have the sister of Absalom, Tamar. And we learned about where they all came from. And Absalom and Tamar came from the king of Geshur side of the family. And if you do ancestry, you learn about these different parts of the family. Amnon was a half-brother. He had a different mother. He came from the Jezreelites. And we see that this was particularly important for a king and an heir, that Amnon was the firstborn. The problem was this. There was a very inappropriate longing that Amnon had for his sister. And he had a cousin. And he had the wrong kind of love. He had the wrong kind of friend and advice from his cousin. And it led to him creating a scheme against his father and against his sister. And it was ugly, it was sinful, it was wrong. And what it resulted in, the fruit of all this, is actually fulfilling the prophecy of Nathan about the problems the family was going to have. And David has to bear responsibility for this. And he was even negligent in this situation, that he was not as wise as he should have been. And he fell for the scheme of his own son. Tamar was left in desolation and ashes, sadness, shame. David is very angry. Absalom hated his brother. So we got a messed up family here. That's the nicest way we can put it. And they were going for this difficult season, a stormy spiritual season. And it's stormy in a lot of levels. And we see that we have a man with unhealthy desires that he acted upon. We see bad counsel and friendship. Now, as we continue to look at the difficult passage, and I wish I could say that, well, today everything's going to turn out good. But spoiler alert, it's not. But yet God is still good in all this. And that God still has lessons in it. And We may say, well, this isn't the funnest stuff to read about, but we should still learn about it. It's important that we learn, and we need to think about, as we do so, our own lives, our own families, and what we can do to try to avoid this. So, picking up in verse 23. 2 years had passed. Now, that's important to think about. All this had happened. Everybody was upset. Everybody was angry. But in families, did people in your family ever bring up something from a long time ago? And it may be what we think is rather trivial, but they remember it. Well, this was not trivial. And Absalom had not forgotten, because a great, terrible thing was done against his sister. It's kind of like, reminds me of a movie where somebody's just thinking and plotting. And for 2 years he had been plotting and thinking. And we see him here, and it almost is like a horror movies. He has these sheep shearers. Now, it was the time for the sheep shearing, but I was curious. It said he had sheep shearers, and they are dangerous objects. And he's during this time there was often a time of feasting and merriment, where people would come over, and he was wanting to invite all the king and his sons over. And Absalom came to the king and said, "Behold, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant." But the king said to Absalom, "No, my son, let us not all go, lest we be burdensome to you." Now, Absalom had a plan, just as there was a time David had a plan against Uriah. We see this. He's got a plan in his mind for his brother. I think he had held his peace for 2 years. I don't know how he did it, but he was waiting for this moment, so he pressed him. And he said, "Let my brother Amon go." Okay, you're not going to all come. You're not going to. That's just fine. Imagine he just said, "Just let Amon go." Now remember something. It's not here, but as we left off last week, he hated him. He hated him. He hated him. The king said, "Well, why should he go with you?" But he pressed him. Now, just as Amon had pressed David before to let his sister come in the room, and David had a lack of discernment, he has a lack of discernment here, and he gave in. He knew something was up. He said, "Well, why?" We need to listen to that discernment in our life, but sometimes we get worn down. Well, okay. All right. Here is where the plan is unleashed. Now, keep in mind, this is within a family. This is a brother. They were half-brothers. Brothers with different mothers, but the same father. And he says this to his servants. "Now mark when Amon's heart is merry with wine, just as David had given Uriah wine. And when I say to you, strike Amon, kill him. Do not fear. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous, be valiant." So the servants of Absalom did to Amon as Absalom had commanded. And all the king's sons arose, and each mounted his mule and fled. Now, I don't know how this was done. Was it with the sheep shearers? But he got revenge. He waited 2 years. He got personal revenge for what his sister did. Well, the other sons arose, they fled. While they were on the way, news came to David. Absalom has struck down all the king's sons, and not one of them is left. Now, that's not true. This was a false story. It's true one of his sons was absolutely killed, but they were not all killed. The others fled. But the king arose, he tore his garments, and he lay on the earth, just like he had done in the loss of his son. David, remember, is reaping some of what he sowed. That his life was spared in the prophecy of Nathan, but he said there will still be a sword in your family and division in your family. And imagine this. First, we just got to pause for a second. Imagine, it's unimaginable. One of your family members has killed other family members. It does happen. But it's heartbreaking. Well, Jonadab comes back into the scene. Who was Jonadab? He was the cousin that was part of the plot to start the whole sin with Ammon, who gave the terrible advice. He was the crafty man. And now he's going to come in kind of like he's going to share some good news with David. Well, let not my Lord suppose they have killed all the young men, the king's sons, for Ammon alone is dead. For by the command of Absalom this has been determined from the day he violated his sister Tamar. Now therefore let not my lord the king so take it to heart as to suppose all the king's sons are dead, for Ammon alone is dead. Well, okay, you feel a little better. One of your sons was killed by another one, and you just can't trust Jonadab. And Absalom's fled, so he's gone into hiding. And the young man who kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, many people were coming from the road behind him by the side of the mountain. And Jonadab said to the king, behold, the king's sons have come, as your servant said, so it has come about. And as soon as he had finished speaking, behold, the king's sons came and lifted up their voice and wept. And the king also and all of his servants, they wept very bitterly. There had still been a death in the family. There had been a killing in the family, from one son to the other son. So again it says, but Absalom has fled. He's gone into hiding. He went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. Now remember, when we were looking at the genealogy earlier, I won't pick it up, but that's his side of the family from his mother. She was the mother, the daughter of the king of Geshur. But David mourned for his son day after day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there 3 years. Now remember, let's do the math on this. That ugly incident occurred. Sometimes we read the Bible, it goes by so fast. 2 years he waited in revenge. Now 3 years he's gone into hiding. And the spirit of the king longed to go out to Absalom because he was comforted about Ammon since he was dead. Boy, you think about pain and you think about things that can go wrong in your life. But there's nothing worse than the loss of a child, or like in this case, a child you cannot see, and years have gone by. And it is sad. As we take a step back, think about in this story, this true series of events, what can we learn from it? What can we reflect upon? Well, all of this, family drama, all the storms, everything else, is the continuing aftermath of sin. It all has its origins in David, but each individual has still made their own choices and bears the consequences of their actions. Also, whether in our life with others or whether in a family, we have to guard ourselves against feelings of hate and personal revenge. They can linger. They can eat at us. They can last a long time, and that's not our job. There is absolutely no defense of what had happened last week. But we have to distinguish between personal revenge and personal wrath and justice. And he wanted his personal revenge. And sometimes that's what we want. We also have to understand the prophecies of Nathan are continuing to unfold. This was all told David, that he had engaged in a lot of bad behavior and there would be consequences of his actions. And it's a sad thing, but it's a true reality. It was what was promised. Then you think, you ever think something's bad in your life? It could be a financial woe. It could be a health issue. There could be things that are problems in our life, and you think, wow, this is so bad. Like with the storm, oh, my house is flooded. But then there's always things that can be so much worse to deal with. I would think on this earth, family drama, family pain, family division, and of course this is on steroids, this is so bad. But any type of division within a family, any kind of hate within a family, is one of the worst things to deal with. So when you think about your life, yeah, there's lots of things that can go wrong. But then there's levels. And David's dealing with something far worse here with this problem within his family. That pain of family turmoil, family strife is absolutely agonizing. So one thing we should seek is a desire to have reconciliation. We should seek to have reconciliation with all people, but particularly in our families. I want to ask you this question. This is how I feel led in this. I would imagine that very few, if any of you here, have a situation as bad as what is in David's family. You know, David had a lot of wealth. He was the king. He had a lot of things, but he had a messed up family. And I'm sure yours could not possibly be at that level, but maybe you do have some family issues. In some level, amongst some in your family. And I think that's something to pray for. We see David here, his heart is going out. If it's a parent with children, if it's problems between spouses, if it's issues with siblings, or whoever it may be, one thing that we should seek, as much as lies within us, is a prayer to have reconciliation in our families. And if you do have it, to be thankful and to work hard to keep it. And if there's division, to do all you can to show forgiveness, to try to be a peacemaker. God has given us our families as a blessing. And because of sin, they're often messed up. But I want to pray for you. I want to pray for your families. That let's all seek that reconciliation within our own families, just as God has shown forgiveness and reconciliation to us.